Hey everyone, Pastor Mock here. We are continuing our study on anger through John Downham's book, The Cure for Unjust Anger. Last week we considered the nature of righteous anger, and for the next couple of weeks we will be looking at unrighteous anger, its nature, its causes, both external and internal, its effects as well. And today and Thursday, we're looking at the definition of unrighteous anger and the kinds of unrighteous anger. So we have the definition from John Downham, the Puritan. He says, unrighteous anger is a wrongful and unreasonable desire of revenge stirred up in us by unjust causes, by which we do not seek the glory of God, the good of neighbors, or of ourselves. It is expressed immoderately and in an unrighteous way. So if we have the standard of righteous anger set forth and present in our minds, which we looked at last couple videos, then really the denial of any aspect of that definition is going to be an example of unrighteous anger. The desire for revenge or retaliation of doing something is not in itself the sinful component, but when you have that desire for revenge stirred up by an unjust cause, you don't have good reason to be angry. And we talked about glorifying God, punishing sin, hating sin, executing justice, having a Godward desire rather than a man-centered desire. These are manifestations of righteous anger. But to not have any of that is indicative of an unrighteous anger. We don't care about others. That would be an unrighteous way of expressing your anger. And people, one way that you know that you are committing an unrighteous anger, you are being unrighteously angry, is that you are responding according to the perceived injury and not according to the actual offense. You've not given enough time to consider whether it actually is offensive to God, injurious to yourself, or injurious to the interest of others. You don't have time to think about that. All you care about is venting and showing justice, regardless of whether there is a just cause or not. All you care about is showing justice to that person who wronged you. And I think one example of this would be being cut off in traffic. And you are so put out that you mutter something. You spew out wrath verbally, though they can't hear you. You cut them off. You give them a little taste of their own medicine. You hurl curses at them. You start praying an imprecatory psalm. Oh Lord, give me justice upon that sinful offender who cut me off, your servant, in traffic. People respond unrighteously when they just quit a job because they didn't get the promotion that they wanted or that they had been seeking. They didn't get the reputation or the acclaim that they had been seeking. Think about a kid also who has not been fed at the time or with the food that he wants. He doesn't have time to consider what he is owed and whether his parent is actually doing good for him by making him a meal and not wanting to immerse him with snacks. Whatever it might be, all he cares about is his hunger And the one who is supposed to give him is supposed to satisfy his hunger is not doing that. When we look at the text in Ephesians 4, verse 31, we see many ways that anger is expressed poorly, unrighteously. Remember, in Ephesians 4:26, Paul says, "Be angry and do not sin." And then in verse 31, he uses the Greek language. He pretty much exhausts the Greek language to express, or to help us to see the many ways that unrighteous anger is expressed. He says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice." So here we have 6 words referring to an unrighteous anger. Bitterness, pikria. This is that settled animosity, that acrimonious animosity, or harshness. There is that hostility of heart directed toward another person, a mordacious spirit, a spirit that is biting the other. Romans 3:14 uses this word coupled with curses. So there's a cursing in the heart of another person. Anger has dug its is dug down deeply into your heart, and now you are always against that person for whatever injury they have committed against you. The word wrath, thumos, is a strong displeasure or rage, indignation at a perceived wrongdoing. The word anger, orge, has the focus on retribution, retaliation. That's the same word, but in verbal form that's used in Ephesians 4:26, "Be angry, do not sin." Clamor, krauge, the emphasis is on a loud cry of anger. Think of angry shouting, yelling at the top of your voice, your sense of justice and anger at someone's wrongdoing. Slander, blasphemia. We have the English word blasphemy from this. Slander here is angry speech that defames another, curses another person. And then malice, kakia, is a mean-spirited wickedness, an ill will. There is malignity or vice. All of these have to do with unrighteous anger. It's sinful. It's universal. Touches every human heart. It's violent. Unrighteous anger lacks moderation. It lacks moderation when we speak. We speak words that dishonor God. It lacks moderation when we have no care for the dignity or respect of others or ourselves, and we choose to return evil for evil and not good. We don't replace the evil with good. Unrighteous anger is person specific. It hates the person, not the sin. Anger ought to be moved against the sin, against the injustice, the real injustice, and not against the offender. The offender, we ought to have good at heart for that offender, a person's repentance and transformation, not that person's condemnation. And unrighteous anger endures too long. We talked about how righteous anger is short-lived, because if the longer the anger lasts, the more opportunity we have to have that corruption of the affection, because the more we're thinking about it, the more we're dwelling upon it, the more likely bitterness is going to set in. I'd encourage you to talk with spouse or kids, talk with your parents about a recent episode of anger, and help just discuss it. And parents, help your children think about whether that episode was good or bad. Was it a good kind of anger? Was it a bad kind of anger, and why? Go through these criteria, these properties of righteous or unrighteous anger, and see if your anger was glorifying God or if it was glorifying yourself. If you had the interests of God at heart, or if you had your own sense of justice in mind. Next time, we are going to look at the different kinds of anger, of an unjust anger, and kinds of angry people. We'll see you next time.